Welcome to the Grand Rapids Housing Commission's Housing Choice Voucher Program briefing for participant families. All household members 18 years and older must be present for this briefing. No exceptions. During this briefing, we will review program rules and regulations, sign required documents, review ongoing participant requirements, be issued a voucher and request for tenancy approval, or RFTA, and be provided instructions for locating a unit. The HCV program is funded by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. The program provides affordable housing and associated services to low-income families. The Grand Rapids Housing Commission, also called GRHC, administers the HCV program in accordance with HUD rules and additional rules laid out in our administrative plan. The Housing Choice Voucher Program is a three-way partnership between the Public Housing Authority, or PHA, the landlord, and you, the participant. GRHC will review applications for eligibility, explain program rules to all applicants, issue a voucher, approve the unit, the owner, and the tenancy, execute a housing assistance payment or HAP contract with the owner, make monthly payments to the owner, determine continued eligibility, and ensure that owners and participants comply with program rules. As a participant, you are expected to comply with the family obligations as a condition of continued assistance, comply with lease obligations where the lease is between you and the landlord, comply with re-examinations and inspections, and report income and household composition changes to GRHC within 15 calendar days of occurrence. The owner will screen applicants, comply with fair housing laws, maintain the housing unit according to HUD's inspection standards, comply with the terms of the HAP contract, collect rent due from the participant, and enforce the lease. You have already learned about eligibility, so this briefing will quickly review the application process, key factors in determining eligibility, income requirements, voucher details, and how to request extensions to the voucher. Let's start by reviewing the application process. The family must have an application on file or have a referral from a specialized program as outlined in our administrative plan. GRHC begins the pre-qualification process and determines eligibility for rental assistance. If the applicant is eligible, a briefing appointment is scheduled. During this briefing, GRHC will issue a voucher to you, the applicant, and then the housing search will begin. Now let's look at key factors in determining eligibility. Applicant families must have at least one household member who is a U.S. citizen or an immigrant with legal immigration status, qualify as a family as defined by HUD and GRHC, have income at or below HUD-specified income limits, provide Social Security information for household members as required, consent to GRHC's collection and use of family information as provided for in GRHC's provided consent forms, and all household members must not have a prior conviction for drug-related criminal activities, producing methamphetamine in federally assisted housing, have a history of felony convictions for violent crimes, and or be subject to a lifetime sex offender registry listing. Next, let's look at income requirements. The total income for all household members must be reported. This includes wages, tips, overtime pay, and bonuses, income from the operation of a business, income from assets, Social Security benefits, unemployment benefits, alimony and child support, temporary assistance for needy families, also called TANF, contributions from family and friends, stipends from a trust, student financial aid, and other sources of income as specified by HUD regulations. When you become a participant of the HCV program, GRHC will access all household members' income via HUD's national databases, which are the Enterprise Income Verification System, or EIV, and the Income Validation Tool, or IVT. These databases are used every time there is a change in income. Failure to report any changes in income could result in termination from the program. In some cases, participant families may report to GRHC that they have no income, which is a status called zero income. GRHC will conduct an interim re-examination every 3 months for as long as the family reports zero income. All household members must report assets, which are items or resources that can be converted into cash. This includes savings and checking accounts, certificates of deposit, or CDs, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and other investments, life insurance policies that have a cash value, personal property held as an investment, such as gyms, jewelry, coin collections, and antique cars, real property, employer pension and retirement funds, individual retirement accounts, or IRAs, KEO accounts, and similar retirement savings accounts, annuities, and trusts. As GRHC calculates a household's income, deductions can be given for certain expenses, including childcare and medical expenses. Regarding childcare, only expenses for children 12 and under will be considered. These expenses may only be counted as a deduction in order to enable a family member to be employed, actively seek work, or further their education. Only medical expenses for a household member who is elderly or disabled will be considered, and includes prescriptions, doctor co-payments, dental expenses, maintenance and upkeep of medically necessary equipment, and mileage to and from medical appointments. Now that we've discussed income, assets, and expenses, let's discuss the voucher, which is the document provided by the PHA that both the PHA and the family must sign. The voucher explains all family obligations, how to use the voucher to become a program participant, the issue and expiration dates of the voucher, and the voucher size. GRHC issues 2 types of vouchers. The first type is a housing choice voucher. With HCV, a participant locates a unit in the private market. After the initial tenancy, the participant may move to another unit and continue to receive rental assistance. You're participating in the HCV program, so this is the voucher you will receive today. The second type is a project-based voucher, also known as PBV. This voucher helps pay for rent in specific privately owned buildings or units. That means that if you get a project-based voucher, you don't get to choose the unit you live in. If you move from the unit, you cannot continue to receive rental assistance. This is not the type of voucher you are receiving today, but is another type of program offered by GRHC. The size of the voucher, or how many bedrooms the family qualifies for, is dependent upon the family size and composition. In other words, GRHC will look at how many members are included in your family, and details about each member to determine how large of a unit GRHC will pay assistance for. GRHC will assign 1 bedroom for each 2 persons within the household, with a few exceptions, which are listed here. A larger voucher than the family would otherwise be entitled to may be granted upon request as an accommodation for a person with disabilities, if necessitated by the disability. The request for tenancy approval, or RFTA, that must be completed by the tenant and owner is issued at the same time as the voucher. HUD requires that the initial voucher term is at least 60 days. GRHC's initial voucher term is 120 days, which is the time the tenant has to search for the unit. Once the family locates a unit, the RFTA is filled out to its entirety and submitted to GRHC. Once submitted, the voucher will be placed in a suspended status. For all families that are in the process of leasing a unit, HUD has implemented a mandatory rule that requires all PHAs to suspend the term of the voucher when the RFTA for the prospective unit is received. This means that when you submit a completed RFTA to GRHC, the time you have left to search for housing pauses while GRHC completes administrative tasks. The suspension ends when the PHA notifies the tenant in writing of the approval or denial of the RFTA. Let's review the steps for submitting the RFTA. Step 1. The RFTA is completed by you and the owner of the unit you wish to lease. The document is submitted to GRHC. Step 2. While GRHC reviews the RFTA, your search time is paused. Step 3. GRHC will either approve or deny the RFTA. If it's approved, your search time will still be paused as all parties move forward with the selected unit. However, if the RFTA is denied, you will need to use the remaining search time to find another unit to rent. The expiration date of the voucher is 120 days from the date of voucher issuance. For participants exercising portability, 30 days will be added to the expiration date issued by the Initial Housing Authority, or IHA. It is your responsibility to track the term of your voucher. If you need more than 120 days to find housing, you can request an extension in writing. You must submit your request for an extension before the date your voucher expires. Please keep in mind that extensions are not guaranteed. If you did not submit the written request for an extension, your case will close and you will need to reapply for assistance. The family must make a reasonable effort to locate a unit throughout the initial voucher term and any subsequent extensions. If you are exercising portability, you must request an extension from your initial PHA, not from GRHC. A family may need and request an extension as a reasonable accommodation to make the program accessible to and usable by a family member with a disability. GRHC will evaluate the request and determine whether the extension is needed. An extension based on a reasonable accommodation can extend the voucher term 60 additional days, for a total of 180 days, and must be requested in writing. GRHC will approve extensions only in the following circumstances. It is necessary as a reasonable accommodation for a person with disabilities. It is necessary due to reasons beyond the family's control as determined by GRHC. Now that we've discussed eligibility, let's explore how to find housing. In this portion of the briefing, we will review tips on locating available housing, how your rent portion is calculated, landlord screening processes, and protections against discrimination. This map shows the areas GRHC serves and where you can find housing with your voucher. GRHC's jurisdiction includes Kent and Ottawa counties. This map displays GRHC's assisted housing in Kent County. The yellow dots are GRHC-owned properties, while the blue dots are GRHC-assisted properties in the private market. For information on assisted properties in Ottawa County, browse affordablehousing.com, which will be discussed a little later in this briefing. After receiving a voucher, tenants need to identify and select a unit. Participants can rent a variety of housing types including shared housing, manufactured homes, single rooms, group homes, apartments, single-family homes or detached, and semi-detached homes or duplexes. Once the unit is located, the participant and landlord must fill out the RFTA and submit it to GRHC. You can use a variety of resources to assist you with your housing search, including visiting websites, looking for rent signs, looking in neighborhoods where you want to live for available units or participating landlords, checking newspaper classified ads, contacting real estate agents, contacting apartment locating services, and asking friends, neighbors, coworkers if they know of available units. AffordableHousing.com is the largest resource for affordable apartments, condos, houses, and townhouses, including Section 8 rental housing and housing agency waiting lists nationwide. Here you can find affordable units that accept your voucher. On each listing, you can see the rent price, property details, the number of bedrooms, images of the unit, accessibility features, amenities, and even which utilities you'll be responsible for if you rent that unit. When selecting a unit, consider the following factors: access to public transportation, quality of the school district, proximity to work and childcare, safety of the area, availability of parking, and proximity to doctors and medical services. Additionally, keep the following questions in mind. Will the unit pass an inspection? What does the lease require of you? And will the rent and utilities be affordable? If you have a pet, make sure that the landlord allows pets in the unit you wish to rent. If the landlord charges a pet deposit or pet rent, you will have to pay this. The Housing Choice Voucher Program will not. Service and support animals are not pets and may be used by a person with a disability so they are able to fully utilize the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Contact your landlord if you are a person with a disability and you have a service or support animal. After identifying a possible unit, make sure it is affordable. The amount of rent you pay is based on the amount of income in your household. Your portion of rent will be at least 30% of your adjusted income. GRHC has a minimum rent requirement of $50. In demonstrated extreme examples of financial hardship, GRHC may waive this requirement. If GRHC waives the minimum rent requirement, you will still have to repay the months that it was waived. You may pay up front or elect a repayment agreement. A payment standard is the maximum amount GRHC will contribute for units and is based on the number of bedrooms in a unit. To ensure affordability, the contract rent of the unit and the utilities the tenant will pay must not exceed GRHC's payment standards. You can find GRHC's current payment standards at grhousing.org. You will also receive a copy of the current payment standards at this briefing. If the combined contract rent and the tenant-provided utilities exceed the payment standard, you will be responsible for the difference. Additionally, if the initial tenant share exceeds 40% of the adjusted monthly income, the unit will be determined unaffordable, and the move will be denied. This means that if the amount you are required to contribute each month is more than 40% of your monthly adjusted income, GRHC will deny the unit. Once you have located the unit and you know which utilities you will be responsible for, you can use the Utility Allowance Worksheet to determine what allowances GRHC will grant you, based on the size of the unit and the structure type. You may receive a Utility Assistance Payment, or UAP, if your total tenant payment, or TTP, is less than the utility allowance for the unit you selected. See GRHC's current utility allowance schedule at grhousing.org. You will also receive a copy of the current utility allowance worksheet at this briefing. Once you've selected a unit, the landlord may conduct a variety of screening activities, which could include checking rental history, criminal background, and credit, denying you a rental unit if you have a history of not fulfilling your lease obligations, requiring a non-refundable application fee to pay for background checks, which is not paid by the HCV program, and requesting that GRHC provide the participant's current and prior address and the name and address of the landlord at the participant's current and prior addresses. Ensure you understand the landlord screening activities and that your family will meet each requirement, including minimum income requirements, before applying for a unit. Understanding screening processes may save you an application fee if you determine you don't meet the requirements. Various laws at the federal, state, and local level protect you from housing discrimination. It is unlawful for a landlord to refuse to rent based on race, color, or national origin, religion or creed, age, familial or marital status, source of income, disability, domestic violence victim status, gender identity, sexual orientation, and military status. Note, fair housing laws do not prevent landlords from screening potential tenants, including conducting background checks. It is unlawful for a landlord to set different terms or conditions or provide unequal services or treatment, make false representations about the availability of units, interfere, coerce, intimidate, or retaliate against those seeking to exercise their rights, and print, publish, or circulate discriminatory statements or advertisements. If you feel you have been unlawfully discriminated against, contact your local fair housing center and file a complaint form on HUD's website. Next, let's talk about another type of protection. The Violence Against Women's Act, or VAWA, states that applicants and participants may not be denied admission to, denied assistance under, terminated from participation in, or evicted from housing on the basis or as a direct result of the fact that the individual is or has been a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, or stalking, if they otherwise qualify for admission, assistance, participation, or occupancy. GRHC will provide every applicant and participant with a notice of occupancy rights under VAWA and the certification of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, an alternative documentation form. This information will be provided at the time the applicant is denied assistance or admission, at the time the individual is provided assistance or admission, and with any notification of eviction or notification of termination of assistance. This act applies to all people, not only women. The VAWA final rule prohibits a covered housing provider from requiring the victim to provide third-party documentation status unless more than one applicant or tenant provides documentation to show they are a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, and the information in one person's documentation conflicts with the information in the other person's documentation, or submitted documentation contains information that conflicts with the existing information already available to the PHA or owner. In the moving into a unit portion of the briefing, we will review the steps of the moving process, unit approval, inspections, and details about the lease and HAP contract. Once you locate a unit, the following steps must be completed. The owner must approve you as a tenant. Then you and the landlord must work together to submit a completed RFTA to GRHC. GRHC will approve the unit and schedule an inspection. Once the unit passes inspection, then you and the owner must sign a lease. Next, we are going to look at these steps in more detail. GRHC provides a blank RFTA form to you, the participant. You have 120 days plus any approved extensions to search for a unit. Once a unit is located, submit an application to the landlord. GRHC does not provide references to landlords on your behalf. If the owner approves your application, you must work together to complete the request for tenancy approval form. Either you or the owner can submit the form, but GRHC recommends that you, the participant, turn in the completed form so that you can verify it was submitted correctly and on time. You are responsible for paying the full security deposit directly to the landlord, which can be up to a full month's rent. GRHC will not assist in these payments for HCV participants. Landlords may not refund the deposit if you do not move in. Then, the landlord will execute a lease with you after the unit passes inspection and is approved by GRHC. You cannot move into the unit until it passes inspection and is approved. Upon receipt of the RFTA packet, GRHC will contact the landlord, determine if the rent is reasonable and affordable, and schedule the unit for an inspection. The selected unit must pass an inspection before you move in and at least every 2 years while you lease the unit. GRHC will coordinate the initial inspection with the landlord. In order for a unit to pass inspection, it must meet all standard requirements, including safety. The unit must have working smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, and all outlet and switch plate covers must be in place. Electricity. HUD inspection standards require 2 sources of electricity in the bedrooms and living room, and a permanently installed light fixture in the kitchen. Windows. HUD inspection standards require a fan or window for ventilation in the bathroom. Must open if supposed to open. Other. Paint must be in good condition. Other items are located on HUD's website. Additionally, please review the lead-based paint brochure on HUD's website. If you choose to lease a unit that was built before 1978 and you have children under age 6, ask your landlord about lead-based paint in the unit. If lead-based paint is ingested by young children, it can lead to damage of the brain, nervous system, other vital organs, and blood, as well as behavioral problems, learning disabilities, and seizures. GRHC will look for peeling and chipping paint during the inspection. When reviewing the selected unit, GRHC will conduct a rent reasonableness test, meaning staff will determine if the proposed rent is reasonable by comparing the unit to other unassisted units nearby. Factors considered include number of bedrooms, square footage, unit quality, type and year built, accessibility to services, amenities, utilities paid by tenant, and management services. If the unit passes inspection and rent is determined reasonable, then the contract will be completed and rent shares determined. The share letter will be sent to both the landlord and the tenant. The tenant and landlord sign one written lease. All tenant-paid utilities must be outlined in the lease. Side deals with the landlord will be considered fraud and could result in termination of housing choice voucher assistance. GRHC will sign a HAP contract with the landlord for the same terms as the lease. GRHC will begin payments to the landlord after full execution of the contract. HAPs will be mailed on or about the first of each month. Part C of the HAP contract, the tenancy addendum, becomes part of the lease and lists the responsibilities of the tenant and landlord. Payments will continue as long as the unit meets inspection standards, you reside in the unit, the owner is compliant with the HAP contract, you are in program compliance, and you are eligible for assistance. In the Housing Expectations section of the briefing, we will review what is expected of you once moved in, what to expect after moving in, and reasons for leaving a unit. Once you move into the unit, you are expected to allow GRHC to conduct inspections and re-examinations, report any income or household composition changes to GRHC promptly, and provide notice to GRHC and the landlord if you are planning to move. Let's take a look at each of these in more detail. GRHC will conduct an inspection of the unit biennially, as well as a re-examination of eligibility at least annually. It is your responsibility to allow GRHC to inspect your unit on a biennial basis. Keep in mind that your landlord may request access to the unit prior to the inspection to ensure the unit meets HUD's inspection standards. It is your responsibility to participate in a re-examination at least once a year. The re-examination will include a review of your income, assets, and expenses, a review of your family composition, and verification of other eligibility requirements. Increases in household income must be reported to GRHC in writing within 15 calendar days. Families are not required to report any other changes in income or expenses. Any change in your family size must be reported immediately to GRHC in writing before you move someone into or out of the unit. Family changes include any change to family size, such as birth, adoption, or court-awarded custody, a family member moving out of the household, adding someone to the household. All new adult additions to the household must be approved by GRHC and pass a criminal background check. A birth, adoption, or court-awarded custody of a child must be reported within 15 calendar days and does not require approval from GRHC. There may be some situations where you may leave a unit, such as moving to another unit, porting to another PHA's jurisdiction, or being terminated from the program. Once your lease is up, you may consider moving to another unit. You must provide notice to the owner and GRHC within the required time frame dictated by the lease. You cannot have any lease violations, and your rent must be paid up to date. Failure to notify all parties could result in the loss of your rental assistance. Before you vacate your unit, you must repair any damage to the unit caused by your family and visitors, clean the entire unit and remove all unwanted debris and furniture, remove all possessions from the unit, turn off your utilities, return your keys to the owner and get a dated receipt for the keys, give a forwarding address for the return of a security deposit, and do a final walkthrough with your landlord. Housing choice vouchers are portable, meaning they can be transferred to any jurisdiction in the United States that has a PHA with an HCV program. Applicants who were Kent or Ottawa County residents at the time of application may exercise portability to another jurisdiction immediately upon the issuance of a housing choice voucher. Applicants who were not Kent or Ottawa County residents at the time of application must use their voucher to rent a unit in Kent or Ottawa counties for at least 1 year before they will be allowed to exercise portability. To request a port to another jurisdiction, the participant must provide their housing specialist with the contact information of the PHA in the area they wish to move to. The participant must be eligible to move, be in good standing status with family obligations, and must not owe any money to GRHC. Portability allows you to take your voucher anywhere in the U.S. where a housing agency is operating an HCV program, including these agencies in surrounding jurisdictions. The final way a family may leave a unit is due to termination. HUD requires GRHC to terminate assistance if the participant violates the family obligations or lease, or when a participant is no longer eligible for assistance. GRHC may terminate assistance for any of the following reasons. A household member violates the family obligations or terms of the lease. A household member commits fraud, bribery, or any other corrupt or criminal act in connection with any federal housing program. A household member disturbs the quiet and peaceful enjoyment of the premises or neighborhood for other tenants. The participant fails to fulfill the repayment agreement with GRHC or any other housing choice voucher or public housing program. A household member behaves violently toward a GRHC staff member or its agents or threatens to do so. The participant fails to provide GRHC with required documentation. A household member manufactures or produces methamphetamine. A participant's income is high enough that the participant is responsible for paying the full contract rent for 6 months. Any violent criminal activity, and any other activities as outlined in regulations and policies. If you disagree with the decision to terminate your assistance, you have the right to request an informal hearing of this decision as outlined in 24 CFR 982.555. You must request an informal hearing in writing, or your right to an informal hearing will be waived and the determination will be final. You must request an informal hearing within 15 calendar days of receiving an intent to terminate assistance letter. To conclude the briefing, we will now review each form in your briefing packet. Please follow the directions and sign each form as it appears on screen. Before we begin reviewing the packet, please pay close attention to this warning. Title 18 U.S. Code Section 1001 states that a person is guilty of a felony for knowingly and willingly making a false or fraudulent statement to any department or agency of the United States federal government. If you provide false or incomplete information, you may be required to repay all overpaid rental assistance you received, fined up to $10,000, imprisoned for up to 5 years, and prohibited from receiving future assistance. First, complete the voucher. GRHC will fill in the unit size, issue date, and expiration date. The head of household should review all the fields for accuracy and then sign and date the voucher. This form certifies that you have watched this participant briefing video. GRHC requires all household members over 18 to participate in the briefing, but only the head of household should fill in their name, complete any other field, and then sign and date the form at the bottom. Hand in a copy of this form with the signed voucher to GRHC's office and get a copy of each for your records. This completes the Housing Choice Voucher briefing presentation. Please contact GRHC if you have any questions. Remember, you can revisit this presentation at any time to review this information. Thank you for your participation.